Hi, boys and girls. It's time for another story. Our story today is called Rodney's Lawn Care. Rodney, he just pulled up in the school bus. His bus was number 318, and he attended the local junior high. Well, when the bus stopped, he went down those steps. He grabbed his backpack, put it over his shoulders, and started walking the next 2 blocks toward home. When he'd gotten past the first block, he crossed the street to go to his own block that he lived on. And from behind him, there was a voice. "Rodney, wait up!" It was Andrew. Now, some time ago, Andrew's family had moved to Rodney's town, and they had bought the house just 2 houses from Rodney's, and he and Andrew had been best of friends. Well, Andrew caught up and he said, "Sure is hot today." Well, it was, although school had been running for 3 weeks now. Summer was not over. It was blistering hot. The poplar trees that lined the street didn't seem to do anything to stop the heat. That heat from the sun was just burning down on them. Well, Andrew, he said, "As soon as I get home, I'm going to the kitchen and getting myself some of that lemonade." Rodney looked at him and he said, "Yeah, and then go do some homework, right?" Well, that was true. Well, when they got to Andrew's house, which was before Rodney's, Andrew waved goodbye. "See you later, Rodney." And Rodney said, "Bye, Andrew." Well, then Rodney started thinking, oh, now that he was in junior high, he had to do new math. And I suppose most of you kids know all about new math. And he was worried. It was tough. He decided the whole school year was going to be tough because of that new math. And he hoped that his teacher could teach them how to do it quickly so they didn't have so much homework. Well, he was so busy thinking that he was just kind of meandering along that hot sidewalk. And all of a sudden, he looked up, and there was a white clapboard house with green shutters and a big veranda that went all the way around the front of it. That house belonged to Mrs. Ashton, and she lived between Rodney and Andrew. Well, Rodney, he looked up, and he saw Mrs. Ashton sitting on her front porch on a chair. Now, Mrs. Ashton was elderly, and she lived in that clapboard house by herself. And Rodney had heard one of the other neighbors say that Mrs. Ashton had said she'd lived in that house for 60 years at least. 60 years, Rodney thought. That's a really long time to live in one house. Well, then he looked up at Mrs. Ashton sitting there, and she just looked a little sad. And she was kind of dabbing at her face with her cloth handkerchief. So as he went by, he said, "Hot day, isn't it, Mrs. Ashton?" He was just trying to be friendly, but she didn't answer, and he kind of shrugged his shoulders. Oh, well. So he went on down the street to his house. He went to the back door, and he unlocked it from the key with his key from his pocket, and he went in the house. When he got inside, he grabbed up that backpack again and he headed upstairs. Well, it was so hot. And he thought, oh, how I wished we had air conditioning. But they didn't. So he kicked off his shoes in his room. He pulled off his socks so his feet, his toes could get some air. And then he sat down on the end of his bed and he saw his computer. And he thought, oh, I should check for any messages. And then he went, no. He set down his backpack and he got up and he said, I am thirsty. So he ran back down the staircase into the kitchen and he got out a glass and he turned on the cold water. He set that glass over here on the cupboard and he took handfuls of water and he put it over his face. He just kept throwing at it till the water was running down the back of his shirt. Oh, it felt good. Then he just let the water run so it would get colder. His hands, oh, it felt so good to have water on him. Then he started filling that glass and he drank one glass full straight down and he was still thirsty. So he drank another half a glass and while he was holding that glass, he looked out the window and he saw Mrs. Ashton. She was still sitting out there on that chair on her veranda in the hot sun. And she had on an old gray fluffy bathrobe and bedroom slippers. And he thought, ooh, she must be hot. But he stood there and he looked at her. Something wasn't right. She still had that handkerchief out and she was dabbing her eyes under her glasses. First one side, then the other side. And he thought, she looks like she's crying. He stood there for a little bit and then he talked to himself out loud. He said, we should go over and check on her and see what's wrong. So, barefooted and all, he ran out through his yard, which was nice and clean, green and lush, onto Mrs. Ashton's yard, which was brown and overgrown and prickly, and it was poking his bare feet, and he thought, I should have put my shoes on. But when he got over to the steps that went up to the veranda, he looked up and he said, Mrs. Ashton, are you all right? And she was kind of startled. She hadn't seen him coming. And she still had that hanky up there. And she said, well, and then from her lap, she picked up a letter that she'd taken out of a brown envelope. And she held that letter up. She said, would you believe this? Those people in the city hall have nothing to do but to send me letters telling me that my yard is a mess. And as if I don't know that it's a mess and that I should mow it. How am I gonna mow it? It's hard enough for me even to get up in the morning alone to mow my lawn. I can only walk with a walker. I can't push a walker and mow the lawn. What am I gonna do? And the tears went running down her cheeks. Well, Rodney, he just stood there and he just didn't know what to do. And before he even had thought about it, he was standing there and his mind was running ahead of itself. And his thought process went like this. Well, it's only been 3 weeks into school, but I have a routine when I come home now. I come home, I get a drink, I go upstairs, I check the messages, I do some homework, I text some friends of mine. It's kind of nice to have some time of my own. And then the thoughts stopped. And Rodney looked up at Mrs. Ashton's sorrowful face. And before he knew what he was doing, he opened his mouth and he said, "I can mow your lawn." And as he was looking at Mrs. Ashton, a look of total relief came across her face and a tiny little smile of gratitude. And he thought to himself, did I really say that? Oh, well. He said, "Where's your lawnmower?" She said, "Well, it's in the shed." Well, Rodney went out to look in the shed, and sure enough, there was a push lawnmower, the old kind with just a handle and no motor and blades that go around like this, and you have to push it in order to make it mow. Well, the thing was so rusty, those blades wouldn't even go around. And he said, "This'll never do." So he went over to his own garage. He opened the garage and he pulled out their power mower and he cranked it up and he set to work, heat and all. Now, it was not easy to mow long, dry grass, but he worked till the job was all done. And do you know what kept him going? That look of gratitude and relief on Mrs. Ashton's face. He had never yet in his life done something for someone else that showed him so much gratitude. And you know, inside, he felt good. You know, my husband often says a saying that he read, and it was, "Every good impulse comes from the Lord." I think that the impulse, that good impulse to help Mrs. Ashton came from Jesus. Boys and girls, you have the ability to help somebody that may not be able to help themselves. And you have the ability to listen carefully to those impulses from God. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye, boys and girls.